I have a need for a TV stand to fill a space in the living room. The room has a recess where there's supposed to be, I guess, kind of a larger television or possibly a bookshelf or something like that, but it's recessed into the wall. And so I'm trying to fill that exact space, which is 76 inches exactly. And so I was having a hard time finding something that didn't have sort of strange looking gaps. So what I'm gonna try to do is I picked up these two, I guess they're end tables or nightstands or something. And I do have all the doors and hardware and stuff. I just started taking them apart, as you can see, but I just wanted to kind of show you what they look like. These were 12 bucks. I think I got them maybe from Craigslist or something, but it was 12 bucks for the pair. And they're kind of interesting looking. There's a lot of detail there, so I haven't cleaned them up yet. I just started disassembling everything. I got the hardware off and had to take the metal frame out of here, which probably should show you how that connects. So this was interesting. I think the rest you can pretty much figure out if you're slightly handy, right? It's, you know, hinges and screws and things to disassemble it, and the top came off from screws underneath, which was fine. But these were a little tricky. So these had a band, and you can see it's almost hard to tell the difference, but there is a piece of rubber here that's got small staples in it. And as you can see, it creates this lip where this metal edge. And man, this is so sharp here. It's just very roughly cut because of course it's not really meant to be handled. So be super careful if you're messing with this. But anyway, what I did was I have a small, what looks like a slightly bent screwdriver with kind of a fork on the end. So a really tiny pry bar meant for prying up tacks and things. And I just pried up two of the edges of this rubber. And then I was able to slide this out carefully. And so I'm gonna try to clean this. I'm either gonna clean this, maybe soak it in some white vinegar, see if it'll come back to like a nice brass color, or I can't tell if it's like spray, if that's like a spray on antique or if it's actually antiqued. I'm starting to think in this light that it's been sprayed intentionally to look like that. So I don't think that's just age. I think that's fake age. So if it's fake age, I'll just paint it. Anyway, so got these guys for 12 bucks. They're gonna sit on the end. And then I got this table. It also came with some chairs that I've already started to take apart. Came with 6 chairs. There's only 3 left. The other 3 are gone. This is a different chair we won't mention. These are gonna become a headboard at some point, but that's a different project. Anyway, I'm gonna take this table. I've started taking this apart, and this comes off again like you think it would. You unscrew these. These go through there. Just take them off. And then all of this has screw holes underneath to take off all this decorative piece. And what I'm gonna do is resize this tabletop to the size that I need. I'm gonna cut it down lengthwise. I'm gonna trim a little bit widthwise because it's just a little bit bigger than 76. I think it's about 80. So I'm gonna trim it down just a little bit. And then I'm gonna put that big top on top of these 2 pedestals, put some kind of shelving in between, because of course the width is going to be way out like this. So roughly 76 inches or so. Maybe that's too far. But if you can imagine, then I'll have to kind of fill this in with some kind of shelf and backing situation. And then I'll have what looks like a small entertainment center that will fit in the space that I need. So these tops, I already took these tops off. I already took the doors and drawers and stuff off of there. So this is kind of ready to go. That'll just need to be cleaned, primed. I haven't quite decided, leaning toward white, but we'll see. I was gonna try to do an aging technique where I might paint them white and then go over it with a little bit of wood stain and then wipe it off to try to pick up some of this detail, but I think this detail is so heavy that I won't need to do that, because even if I paint it white and then go over it with a nice gloss, that's a deep enough detail there that it will show without me having to force it with some kind of stain to bring it out. I'll continue kind of just taking some of this apart, and then I'll give you a quick glance of what everything looks like, mostly disassembled. I mean, these are pretty much ready to go. And then we'll talk a little bit more about how I plan on cutting this table down. So these are off now, and the legs are off. I'd flip this and show you, but the tabletop is in pretty good condition. This isn't anything fancy. You can see it's some kind of, manufactured particle board. It's not like it's some kind of mahogany table or something, probably why it was only $50. But it's got the size I need, and I will be able to trim this and then clean it up. It is, like you can see here, there's leaf in it. The leaf is in, so this will pull apart. I'm gonna have to also figure out how to stabilize this, because once I cut it, of course, it's not gonna have these, I won't be able to keep these big rails on where the rails are giving some nice stability. I mean, these are pretty heavy rails. So my plan for now, unless I change my mind as I get into this, is to, like I said, I'm gonna trim a little bit off of this rounded edge, because this round edge here is gonna push me out too far from the wall. As you can see, you figure if you carry that all the way forward, I'm gonna have a kind of a weird gap here. So I'm gonna even this off, either here at that little dent, or this kind of detail here. And if I cut that straight across from that detail down to this detail here, that'll shave off just these couple inches here and I do that on both sides, that will take this apex down straight and give me a straighter edge. And then I'm gonna cut it. I have a nice rail that I can use and put my circular saw against the rail. I'll clamp it down and then cut along that. That will also make this piece a lot more manageable. Fortunately, there's still, in between, of course, like most leaves, there's some holes and pegs here that hold this stable. And then I intend, if this works, to wood glue this in place, take this rail out of the way, and then I'll add some maybe really thin bracing in here, just like a cross, like a sheet metal, thin sort of sheet metal brace, just to keep this pulled together this way, because of course it has a tendency to separate so that you can take the leaf out. And then I'll also have to consider potentially against the back edge adding something to stabilize probably most of the length of this. Then once I get the whole thing unified, that's when I'll start to clean it up, paint it, prime it. On the other side, I'm gonna try to fill in these gaps just a little bit, so that you don't see the line, that you don't see the line here as much. Hopefully that'll close up tight. And that way it looks like one solid piece. And then since I intend to paint it out anyway, again, this is just veneer over particle board, so it's not like I could sand it, restain it or something. So since I intend on painting it out anyway, I'm gonna try to fill in those cracks, try to make it look smooth, sort of like Bondo, if you will, with some wood filler, give it the appearance of a single piece, and then attach it to the top, and then I'll have to figure out what I do for the shelving in between. Okay, so let's review where we are so far. I had to take a little bit of time away from this project. I was really sick. But back, feeling good, and here's where we're at. So I managed to disassemble the entire table. So there's one half, the leaf, the other half. And then I was messing around with what I'm gonna need for dimensions to fit where I want this to go. And I landed on, the only way that I'm gonna be able to really do this is to use the leaf twice. So, cut the leaf in half, and I'll turn it around and be able to kind of marry that edge up. And I cut the top also in half. Actually move my saw. And I just threw a straight edge here and just cut it in half, obviously. Oops, almost dropped that on the floor and my foot, but I didn't. That was fortuitous. So, so now I've got the top cut in half, and what I'll be able to do is take my cutting pieces out of the way here. I find it handy just to put a couple of pieces of wood underneath, stabilize the wood, that way I can cut. I've got a healthy gap to my table so I don't cut the table, and then I'm not struggling to, you know, cut something this heavy off the side and having it fall. So I just, by picking the piece up a bit, then you can just cut and it stays put. I don't know where, these were actually packing material to like, I think like a coffee table or something I got, but they're nice, consistent kind of little plywood chunks that I can use to get a piece of height. Anyway, so that's what that is. Anyway, so now what you'll see here is I've got one half of the table. That leaf, I think I can get this to fit. And I've got this leaf, which I'll show you how I deal with this in a minute. And then I've got the other half of the table here. Since they're mirror images, of course, I can just not drop that on my foot and connect these up like that. Boom. And so now I'll have one sort of continuous long top, which is what I'm going for. How I'm going to deal with this, because obviously now I've got a situation here where my pegs aren't lined up. What I'm going to do, since these guys are exactly pointing at one another, I'm just going to drill a hole drill these out, cut these off, and drill in and leave this here, and then I'll be able to marry all the pieces together and I'll have one continuous piece. I would say that worked pretty well. I left this so you can see it. So when drilling this out, eventually I was able to get the old wood plugs out by kind of drilling them. So now we've got our holes that should fit together nicely. I didn't use a lot of pressure. I wanted the drill bit to kind of naturally find its way the way these holes were already formed. And now that the old plugs have come free, this should just be how these holes were manufactured. Even if they're a little big, I can always hit them with some wood putty or some, obviously some wood glue and stuff. These aren't gonna be a primary, you know, load bearing kind of thing. They're more for alignment. So now I'll line this all up. We'll take a look. Okay, here's our holes we just made, and let's see if we can't get this to line up. Nice. And then we'll just get this lifted up here and boom. Okay, so now we've got ourselves one extremely long, what's going to be some sort of credenza type top. And so you almost can't, I don't know how easily on the camera they are to see, but the joints, even by feeling, are pretty tight, which is good, and these edges line up pretty well. I'm gonna have to, of course, reinforce this, make sure everything's lined up. This little gap here is probably gonna need a little attention, but everything's for a table that I got for 20 bucks. So it's pretty good. And there may be some like sawdust and stuff in there too. Okay, now though, this is actually too long. Now that I made it longer, I think it's too long. So let me see. Now I've got to figure out. Yeah, okay, that's way longer than I need. I'm looking for more like 76, and this is like 93. So, do a little math, figure out where I'll be able to trim the ends off of this, because I need this more straight line than I do these weird steps in. Just a little step in is fine, but like the 1, 2, 3 cut ends, and then this was even sort of another rounded edge that I trimmed flat, but now I'm not gonna need that because I'm gonna cut this probably, probably cut 8, 9 inches off of each side. So we'll see how that goes. And then when I'm done, I'll have kind of this little detail in the front, nice kind of long front straight, same detail on the other side. And then my challenge will be figuring out how to stabilize all these janky pieces and put them on top of this thing. All right, everyone, here is some updates. This is what the top looked like after I cut each of these pieces, kind of trimmed them up. And this is sort of a mock-up of just how it's gonna be laid out. I've got them like this because I'm gonna build some shelves in between, and then because this is in 4 sections, I've been thinking about how to stabilize. And what I determined for a plan is this. I've got this piece of, it's 2x4. Well, yeah. I'm just gonna run that across the top here of all of these. And then that will give a nice straight line stability across all of these pieces. Certainly in the middle, it will give some strength to these pieces itself. And then also underneath, what I'm gonna do is I have this piece here, which it was maybe an inch larger. I just cut an inch off it so it would fit. I'm gonna span under here. I'm gonna attach it under. And that way I can kind of screw in from in here into that, and that should give this bottom some nice strength. I'll have this top cleat running under here, give that some nice strength, and then I'm going to fill this panel in with a piece to flatten it out, and then I'm gonna put a shelf in the center here. So you won't see that cleat, and then it'll kind of change the depth of this. Why? Because I have a subwoofer that's gonna fit in behind here, and I need about 10 inches of room. The subwoofer's, actually I might even need a little more. Just, I don't want it right up against the wall. I don't want it right up against this. I want some space around it. So to get that space, I'm going to make these shelves more sort of book depth or something. They're not gonna be full depth shelves. Would have been easier just to kind of span a back across all of this and build deep shelves, but I need that space for the subwoofer. Once I have my stability situated, I'll be able to think about how I'm gonna treat this top. You can see like the little seams like this. If I get really in close there, I'm gonna have to figure out just how I can squeeze these together well enough so that they're at least not having a tendency to creep apart from one another. And then I'm also going to have to fill in these gaps, probably with some kind of wood glue, sand. It's gonna be a real process. The challenge there is, if this isn't super strong, all of that work's gonna be for naught, because the second I pick up one end of this, which I'm gonna have to do because I can't just lift this whole thing, the second I pick up one end, this may get some, flex to it and crack all that hard work if it's painted and stuff. So anyway, what I'll do is cleaning up these pieces next. I'm just before I attach any of these parts, I'm just kind of dry fitting and visualizing everything. For example, this isn't going to go all the way to the end of this wood, right? Of course, you're going to have a little bit of a lip here. So I've been using 75 inches, which is the end of this. But really, it's going to come in a bit just to give it kind of this inset look. And then, so that changes the dimension of this piece of wood. Obviously, if I had made it 75, it would have been, right to this edge, and underneath you would have seen it potentially sticking out. So making sure that this is going to be short enough that I can attach everything behind it. But of course, before I assemble everything, I need to know where these are in relationship to one another, what this gap underneath is going to be in between here. But once I do that, once I figure out where all this goes, what I'm going to have to do is clean these up and actually attach the bottom, attach the top cleat, and hopefully that will give this enough strength where I can move it around without the top on for a while I work on it and paint it and stuff. If for some reason that does not give it enough strength, I'm going to have to come up with something else. Okay, here we go. All right, here we are now. This will be a little bit easier to explain now that I can kind of walk you through it. You see, I've taken that long strip of wood here and just attached it underneath with some screws. There's only 2 screws on each half of this, which is of course inadequate, but it's just to kind of see how this is going to work out. So I think that's going to be what I need. And then what I did, and that spans all the way underneath, so that I can screw in this corner as well. So I'll be able to put some screws this way from underneath, probably from the inside down, I guess. The screws I have are too long. So once I do that, but then anyway, that'll give me my sort of bottom shelf, and it also helped me understand the distance between here, which is fine. I was mostly concerned with the outer edge. What I wanted was for these to be inset 1 inch from the top. So the top is 75 inches. The total overall length here is 73, so that I can have 1 inch on each side. Okay, so now that these are 73 inches apart, I was able to kind of shape the bottom. There's a couple of angled pieces of wood that I had to notch around and stuff. But anyway, you'll see I was able to get these. And it's worth noting that there was a piece of molding detail here, just like on this side. You can see. And all I did was I drilled a hole here. I drilled a hole here. And then took my jigsaw and just cut straight across, notch this out like this. And so now I have a nice straight piece here on both sides that will accommodate this wood flat to the bottom, so it can be nice and flush, so I can screw it tight. Okay, so that's the bottom, and that's what's gonna stabilize the whole bottom piece. Then, and that's really more for, like I said, just stabilization, rigidity, that kind of thing. The main, I guess, beam that's going to be supporting here is this, that's going to go across all the back. This was my solution to this sectioned piece of top that I know is going to need a lot of support, and also this whole thing just needs some strength, right? I've got floating janky pieces all over the place. So the way to do that is just get one nice strong beam. This piece of wood, like most wood you find at the stores, was pretty warped and horrible, but with some clamps I was able to fight it, and it looks relatively straight. Doing my best here. So what I'll do is I'll screw this through here in several places, which will be nice and strong here, obviously on the same side. And then I'll have a nice, this will be the main sort of spine of support, if you will. It'll carry the weight of all of the tabletop across all the way. I won't have to worry about any of that flexing or acting strange on me. This will just support the bottom from twisting and wiggling around and being weird. And I should overall, especially once I put the top on, really come together and be strong enough to be a reasonable piece of furniture without cracking. The other thing I did, which I think you'll find interesting, is just for kicks, I wanted to test the shear bonding strength of wood glue. And so what I have here is a couple of pieces of the cutoffs, and you can sort of see the seam here. I just butted them up together. I've just put some wood glue here, kind of liberally butted them up together and let it dry essentially with its own weight, like this. Let this piece kind of press on this piece and carry its own weight. And I'm really shocked at just how strong this piece of wood is with just edge to edge. There's no any kind of physical mechanical connection here. It's just two butt end pieces of wood. Now, is that going to be super strong for anything kind of load carrying? No. Am I surprised that it's this strong with just some glue? Yes. So that's good. And I think that will help together with this beam. I believe that is going to be sufficient for my purpose. Anyway, that's the concept. I'm still working on it, clearly. I'll update you if I figure anything else out. Okay, here's a quick update of the progress. Let me just show you. I just kind of mocked up, put the door on. Here's the shelf complete now. Let me actually pull this off. So what I glued these pieces so that they're a little more manageable. So these just have an end-to-end butt joint and some glue, which I'll have to obviously kind of sand and work on. That'll be next. And then, just so you can kind of see how I did this. So I just put the shelf in. This is the same bottom board that I had. And then I put this vertical backing piece here. You can see. And I just kind of, I screwed it in from underneath, and then I screwed it in from the sides here so that it's sturdy. And then I just put the shelf in the same way. I just screwed the shelf in from here. So now I've got this shelf piece in. This notch, I had to notch out like we were talking about for my subwoofer. So now I should have enough clearance to get the subwoofer back here. It's about, it's like a foot. It's gonna take up a good chunk of this space, but anyway, at least I'll be able to get it out of the way. And that's why this overhang is the way it is too, to give some clearance for like plugs. I have, a battery UPS. I have a lot of cables and stuff here, so I wanted to have a little bit of a space here for all of that, plus the subwoofer. So I may, drill a hole in the back of this and put some of my components in here. These just have like a grill. I better move these before they fall. There we go. So, yes, that's where we're at. Really from the bottom and this back brace, I added this bracket. Now, the other thing I did was a real treat. I added these inserts. So this is just like a 1/4 inch plywood. And I cut this panel to fill this gap and shape. And so what I did was, obviously, I trimmed it to the highest height of this peak here. And then I just used a piece of paper template to try to get this curve roughly. I cut it a little big and then just kind of refined each piece down until I got the shape relatively close. And then you can see I just filled the rest in with some some wood filler and sanded it in. So otherwise I would have had a pretty significant gap here, and it would just look weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not supposed to have a big gap of daylight because of this edge. So I did that. And then, yeah, I put the shelf in, and then I glued these. And the other thing I did was I just spray painted some of our hardware here. So the hardware is going to be gold, obviously, and just spray painted some of that stuff up. Okay. No, next, I'll be working on the top a lot next, and I'm going to sand. I'm going to do a little more sanding and prepping on this, and that's it. The other thing I'm doing is I'm just running around and using some odorless mineral spirits with a glove, with eye protection, with good ventilation. It'll just, if you see like some of the grime on this, it'll just help you cut down on any of the, I've got like a scruffy sponge here. And I have a bucket of water actually that I've been rinsing this off in, but I find you can use a sponge or a brush or something, but to help you get into these grooves a bit better. And I would be applying a little more pressure if I could hold the part in the other spot. Right now I'm holding the phone, so, but you can see there's a lot of, it's a lot of just kind of, you know, built up stuff on the surface here. And if you get a little cleanup between the scruffiness and the chemical, you'll see it'll really kind of help prep this for paint. That way you're not painting over grime, and either your paint won't stick or it'll kind of bleed through or whatever. So anyway, that's what I'm doing next. I've got this up here. I've already kind of wiped this down, although it's still very dusty in here, and I think I'm gonna try to paint in here. So after I clean up all the dust, I'll have to give this all a wipe down again. Okay, so here's the progress. Now, I hit all these with a coat of primer first, and what I used was something I had left over actually from when I painted some cabinets. It's a Sherwin-Williams primer, pretty high quality, kind of good coverage primer. It did go on a little thick, but certainly on the top, I just kind of sanded it down with a little bit of 240 grit sandpaper to kind of knock down the primer. I tried using my sprayer, but it was drying too fast here. It was too thick. Even if I cut it with water, different nozzles, etc. It was still, I think it's just the temperature here. It's over 100 degrees. So it was just drying. So I had to resort to brushing, but we ended up with a pretty good surface. The surface you're looking at here now, I actually painted over. I did a coat of primer and then sanded with 240 grit, just very lightly. And then wiped that down with a paper towel. And then this is a bare ultra white paint. It's looking pretty good. I'm pleased you can't really see the seams too bad. There's one. You can kind of see that. I think that's mostly because the wood is dark and you can still see the difference between the wood and the wood filler, which is much lighter color. But most of this has, all of this has a coat of primer and then a coat of the ultra white. So now you're starting to see this take shape. Let this dry, like I said, let everything dry, give it another coat. Hopefully it goes on smooth, and check back in tomorrow. Okay, here's where we're at. Mini coats of white paint. I want to say on the top here, I was getting a lot of texturing from using a brush, so I changed to a roller, but even the roller, I think it's just because everything dries so quickly out here, I ended up having to just sand between coats to kind of knock down some of that texture. So I think you can probably even still see in some light. I also used spray paint can of lacquer. So there's actually 3 coats of lacquer on here. And let me see, just see if I did a test piece, but it's kind of hard to tell between the lacquered piece and not. Let's see. You can see kind of the tip of this has some shine to it, and then you can see where the shine ends. So half of this is lacquered, half of it is not. I just wanted to make sure, see how it was going to affect the paint. Make sure it didn't like yellow, peel, do anything weird. So anyway, it doesn't make a huge difference. It just adds a bit of a shine to it in the right light. So this has 3 coats. These all have 3 coats, and that's actually more to protect the paint. It does 2 functions. Protects the paint because the lacquer cleans up a little easier. Anything the glossier something is, the easier it is to clean, the more kind of stain resistant it is. So anyway, I just stuck the drawers in there to make sure they still function correctly. I haven't tried to close them all the way yet, but you know, sometimes when you paint, certain gaps and things kind of get sticky, and I may have to just refine these edges a little bit. The next tricky thing that I'm going to have to do today, these doors, the metal grates, I don't know if you can see this here. The metal grates are held in with this rubber gasket type edging thing here. I'm gonna think about this, maybe experiment a little bit. Okay, here's where we're at. Got the top attached. There were a lot of nice places under here I could have used to attach the top. Part of the problem is my drill is too big to get in here to drill pilot holes. And since this is like MDF, I can't really push and self-tap with like a drywall screw. It just kind of ends up kind of spinning out and not biting and grabbing. It really does need a pilot hole. So since I could get to these front 3, there's 3 holes under here. I just used those, 1, 2, 3, because I could kind of angle the drill in. And then around back, I just use angle brackets here. And I just put them I put a couple down the line, 1, 2, 3. So that should keep the top enough. I'm not gonna be lifting this by the top anyway, because it's in these 3 sections. But you know, I think considering that these were 4 separate pieces of wood, you can kind of see the seams a little bit, but I mean, only if you're really looking for them, you can sort of see where the seams are. But if you were just looking quick, or if you're at a bit of a distance, they're really not visible. So, okay, that's the state. Oh, let's take a quick look over here. The other progress I did was I put all the hardware on the doors. So, of course, I had to paint the hinges. Keep that in mind if you're doing something like this, that if your hinge is facing outward and you're changing the color of the hardware, you'll also want to paint the hinges. So I sprayed the hinges. I assembled all these. This was a little tricky. This also has nails. So I was able to reuse the old holes, and of course I saved all the hardware, so I reused the nails that came with it, and then just hit it with a Q-tip and some paint to paint the tips. And yeah, and that's it. And then I put these on. These, I ended up just stapling these from the back. So it's not gonna look super beautiful from the back side, but I had a volley of failures with different size staples and things. And I finally said, you know what? I only care about what it looks like when it's closed. If you open it up, it's really, I don't really need to beautify in here that much. I mean, it doesn't look great, but I was gonna seal it up with some white silicone, and it was dry on me, so I just said forget it. Okay. That's the doors. Next, I'm putting some cabinet hardware on. Oops, I threw that on the floor. So I'm gonna reuse the old holes here for the cabinet hardware, and then I'm putting it on loose until I put the doors on, and then once everything's aligned and closing nicely, I'll tighten it up. So that is my plan there. Here's one of my failed screws back here. Okay, here we go. Progress. Here are some of the final shots as I wrapped up this project. I added some wallpaper inside the shelving and also inside the drawers just to give it a little bit of contrast and break up all the white. And then I moved it in to where it goes, and it thankfully fit. And then finally decorated it with some lights and some objects and things, and I'm pleased with how it came out. Hope this was fun. Thanks for watching.